my name is Emily. I'm going to talk about how it is starting from student and turning into professional. Just a wee caveat before starting and sort of talking about what I'm doing. These tips and these advice that I'm going to give is things that worked for me. I had the ability or the time to put in. I don't have kids. I didn't work during my time at university apart from during the summers. So I was able to do some things. I realized that life looks different for different people. So I just want to sort of don't take my advice word for word, make it your own. Just, so I'm not kind of preaching and sort of telling you this is what you have to do, because that doesn't work for anyone. Okay, so who am I? So I'm from the south of Sweden from the beginning. I had a career-ish working within retail before I realized that I wanted to work with games. So I've always played games my whole life. I just never figured it was feasible to have a career within it. So I moved from Sweden to Scotland. And as a caveat, so you get to know a little bit more apart from my university trail and what I'm doing. My favorite game is A Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. So you know that. So if you want to talk about that next time we see each other or something, I'm happy to. So 2015, I started Abertay University. So I moved, as I said, from Sweden to Scotland. And to do this, there are courses in Sweden as well for schools, but I wanted to study game design and production, and that's not a thing in Sweden just yet. So yay, Tay and all you other people that was sort of studying the same thing. My people. I was also president for the Abertay Game Dev Society for a year, so it was during my 4th year. Otherwise, I would have loved to continue with that. But during my 3rd year of university, we went to Birmingham and did Dear Academy at EGX. And my team won with a game called Kinoko. I also founded an online, but also in both. I founded a Midsummer Jam, which is a game jam which you can both jam at on-site or online. It's fine. It didn't happen this year because of COVID. Life, things happen. And up in the corner, you can see just a smidge of a controller that I built for my 4th year project. I really love custom controllers. So my whole dissertation was about custom controllers and how different ways of play and new tech sort of makes accessibility better. So as I mentioned, I really, really love game jams and custom controllers. So these are just a couple of things that I've been working on, and I'm not going to sort of talk too much about them, but you can see the controller with the boxes or the tin boxes it's a smell controller, which you don't really sort of control it via the smell. It was things in the boxes that smelled, and when you open the lid, it's sort of connected with the copper wires to makey and so on. The controller up in the corner is called Arcade 4, which is a sort of a reminiscence of it started with what if you had Hungry Hippo, but as a controller? And that's sort of where my mind goes. So yeah. A Kraken Adventure, it was the first game jam game that I made. So it's all paper assets, animated and sort of taken photos of, accompanied by jazz music from a French jazz band that was really kind to let us borrow their song for the game. Chemtrails is a serious game jam that I took part of for St. Andrews University. So about teaching how to use a lab. So So that's it. So to start to talk and stop talking about me, what I think really made one of the biggest difference for my time at university was that I volunteered a lot. Every opportunity I got to sort of show students around at university, or if there was a conference, or even if it wasn't things that sometimes were games related, I just sort of knew by talking to people that they needed help. And I was there. I tried to help out and do as much as I can and had the availability to do. I think it's really important because it shows that you're a team player. If you're volunteering, it's usually long nights or heavy lifting or on the weekends. So going out drinking wasn't always the option. I'd like to sort of give a little bit of a sort of inside information there that you might not be able to go out drinking with your friends, but if you're volunteering for an event, you might be able to go out partying with the people that you are volunteering with or the conference that you're at. So it's fine. It's fine either way. It would also help fill out your CV. If you're starting university straight from whatever you call it, like if you're 18 or under, if you're 18 when you start university, you might not have a lot of work experience. Filling it out with volunteering shows that you're willing to put in the work, and that you also learn how to deal with people and take responsibility. You're not shying away from doing things. So, but how do you go about it? You can't just sort of show up somewhere and then just, well, I'm here now, give me things to do. You can try that, but it's probably better to talk to the lecturers that you have at the university. If you have an external relations or some form of like marketing team or something like that at your university, they usually know if they have places or things happening that they need people to help with. And if you're studying games, it could be showcasing games for visiting politicians or whatever. There are also opportunities outside of your university. So I know Yuki sometimes apply for during Gamescom and bigger events. You can apply to volunteer at their booth. I know a couple of other bigger companies do it as well, but Yuki is the only one that I've been working for and that I know do it. So that's an option. It was really fun going to Gamescom. It was also really tiring. But yeah, it is an investment of your time. So, and your effort and everything. So how to put this into words? Like if you do make things, like if you do projects on your own, it's fantastic. Like I'm talking about game jams and stuff later on as well. That is super great. But showing that you're willing to put in like the physical work of going somewhere, helping someone, that's a person that most companies want at their work, on their team that they want to work with. So I think that's a very good sort of starting point for getting your foot in, and you get to talk to really cool people as well. So game jams. I love a game jam. So don't shy away from the fact that game jams sounds maybe scary. Game jams are a fantastic opportunity to fill out your portfolio. When you start university, you hear lectures, you hear other people talking about like, oh, you should think about your portfolio, you should do things. If you do 2 game jams a year from year 1, and I don't know how long you study for, if it's 3 or 4 years, but at that point you will have 6 to 8 games in your portfolio. They might not be perfect, they might not be fantastic, But the fact is, it doesn't matter. You have things to show. You engaged, you took part. Game jams is also incredibly good to learn how to scope a project. If you've done a game jam that is 48 hours and you can go, oh, we're gonna make this grid-based, like hexagonal, like game where you move the players, you won't have time for that. You probably will have time for like Pac-Man. Even Pac-Man is too advanced though. Something super simple. Find one mechanic and work with that. You will learn that it's easy to overscope. And if you're future producers, never overscope, always pull back. It's also, in a very small sense, it's good to see the process from start to finish, where you start planning out what is your game, what do you need, and then follow through. If you come to a company, it's a lot more complicated. It's a lot more pieces to sort of put into what's going into a game. But this at least shows you something. And it also shows your future employees that you are willing to take something from start to finish. And by the way, all the games that you see here are both games that I've jammed and from events that we've had when we were at university. So, yay. But so how do you get going jamming then? If it's a little bit scary to start and you don't know what to do, you kind of feel a bit alone, talk to lecturers again. I want to say that as a general thing. Talking to lecturers and asking for help or discussing with them if it's things that you want to do or manage, please go ahead and do it. They are there to help. They want to see you succeed. So please don't sort of think of lecturers as weird and off-putting and sort of out there. Most of them are working incredibly hard to make what you're learning something good, or your learning experience good. Sorry. So again, talk to lecturers. If you're in your first years or something, they might know of older students that are willing to take on junior students, and so they can put you on the team. Sometimes even lecturers jam themselves and they can take you under their wing. Or you can do what I do. I just forced my way in. And so I have a friend who's working as a lecturer, and I'm doing most of my game jams with him at this point because I'm like, I have an idea, and he's like, oh no. So, but they do like to jam and they do want to do things. If you feel like you don't have enough experience or something to come with, help with what you're able to do. My first jam that I mentioned, the one with the boat and the paper art, I didn't really know what I was doing. So I got them tea. I went and bought some donuts. I cut out some paper that someone was handing to me, like I was a 5-year-old, and just like, okay, I can cut things. That's fine. And then the artist did his magic, and it was all amazing in the end. Do what you are able to do. Don't stress it. Like if you feel like you don't know, the fact with game jams is that you're meant to learn as well. So do what you can, and it'll be fine. If you feel a little bit more safe and sort of know how to jam, like you've done a couple of jams, I know you have. I can see it on you. Try new tools. Try new art styles. Find assets or weird music that you can use, or push your boundary for what you want to do. If you feel like it's not as much of a sort of challenge, try new things. We had a game jam that we organized where it was a couple of first years Yeah, at that point, they were first years. First year programmers who started up Godot and made a WarioWare kind of game on Godot. First thing, 3-day jam, and it was so much fun. And push your limits, see what you can do. And by the way, this is from my game Kinoko that we won their academy with, just for information. There's always a game jam somewhere. Itch.io have a calendar which you can find game jams anywhere. I recommend Game Maker's Toolkit Jam or Global Game Jam, which you probably know about at this point, but they are really good. You get to engage with a lot of people, and it's really interesting to see what people do all over the world. I also say jam safely. Take care of yourself. I know there's some people who jam all night. If you want to do that, fine, that's okay. Just as long as you take care of yourself. And check in with your friends. Like if you see that they are struggling during the jam, take care of them. And also, in the grand scheme of things, the end result isn't important. It doesn't matter. I've shown pictures of jams that I've made where sort of it's been a kind of a pretty result because you can't see the gameplay of the photos, then that's good. But the end result isn't important. Like some jams just doesn't end up in anything. It just looks awful, or it doesn't work, or it's buggy, or it's broken. And that's okay. I learned something from those too. So take the pressure off, don't stress it, and do your best. Another tip for getting started in the industry, I would say, is use Twitter. It's a really great tool for following industry professionals and get news and information pretty quickly on what's happening in the industry. You can see where sort of what's happening and sort of follow the trends, so to say. I actually got my job via Twitter. I don't know if actually Oscar knows this, but it was another woman who was posting about the job at Fundamentally Games. And I asked her, who should I talk to? And she gave me Ella Romano's email. And that's how I got in contact with them. So Twitter is an insanely useful tool for finding those small things. It's also really useful to learn names and companies and get to know people from around the world. As I said, I'm Swedish, but I didn't start working in the game industry until just a year ago. I don't know people in the Swedish games industry, but Twitter helps me follow them and helps me start building connections with people. So despite not being there physically, you can start and build connections all over the world. So Twitter, very useful, not just for shit posting. Mostly shit posting, depending on who you are, I guess. I only post serious things. Okay. But when you grow up, what then? When you graduate, what are you gonna do? What's the next step? Stress. No. Don't stress it. Like, if you don't know what you want to do after graduating, fine. Apply for jobs, see where you end up. Focus on what you enjoy. Don't stress if you don't know, like, oh, but I don't know if I want to be a producer, if I want to be a designer. Get a job within any of those fields. You can always move, you can always change, you can always get another job. Don't sort of stress it too much or sort of think that you need to have a very thought out plan. Some people just know. Some people know exactly what they want to do and they just go for it. I am so impressed by that. But then I also think, but I've done so many weird things because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I moved to Norway for a while and worked as a, what do you call it, picking glasses in clubs, and worked as a barista and sold underwear. And I mean, I've done like really weird things and I've enjoyed all of it and I learned from everything. So don't take it too hard. Like, if you don't know, you will. It'll be fine. I promise. And so, you got a job. Yay! Congratulations! So what do you do when you get a job? Well, I would say one of the first things that actually changed a lot of things for me was a tip I got from Ella Romanos, one of my managers. So Oscar, of course, is my manager, and my other manager is Ella. She has a thing which she calls a dump list, which is, she has it online, we have it online. We're using Notion as our tool. It's a place where I write down everything. So not just the important tasks, not just the things that I think I will forget. I write down everything. If it's, I need to remember to move a folder from Dropbox to another folder in Dropbox, it's a task that I have written down there. Because what happens is that I download the information from my brain to the list. And since I don't have to sort of remember it, because I can rely on that everything is there, everything I need to do is written down, it helps me structure my days and my weeks better. I don't stress over, maybe I forgot something, maybe I didn't do this. And yeah, I have to say, like, just to sort of give a little bit of like support or sort of confirmation for starting doing this, I forgot to write things down in the beginning because it was just an unusual process at the moment. And then you can't 100% rely on your list. So you have to remember to write down everything. But when you get to that point that you do, it is such a relief, because I try to do 4 things at the same time, and I always forget something. But if I at least have them written down, I can kind of do my 4 things at the same time and then go back to my list and go, oh, I only did 3 out of 4 things. I need to do the 4th one now as well. So that really changed how I work. So I don't know if that works for you, but again, as I said in the beginning, this worked for me. Make it your own. So when you start a new job, I like the picture of when I got my driver's license. When I got my driver's license, both my dad and my driver teacher, I don't know if this says anything about my driving, I hope not, but they were saying that this is the start of you learning. The car that you have in your hand is only the first. So the first job that you get, or the job that you get, is only the start. It's a constant learning going into something new. So ask questions. It's easy to forget that you sort of, when you are starting maybe from on a lower position in a company, you are used to just being told what to do. But by asking questions, you actually grow your knowledge base. And different companies have different lingos as well. So I realized starting at Fundamentally that some things that we talked about at university wasn't similar, fundamentally didn't use the same words as we used at university or what I was used to. So you kind of, by asking, well, how do you think about this, or how do you do that? Like, you constantly grow your base, your knowledge base. And it's important to stay curious as well. So we have a team of outsourced developers that we work with. And during moments when I think we have time for it, I ask them questions like, well, that task that you're about to do or that you're going to plan for, like, how do you do that? Like, what do you think about? Because I'm not a very good programmer, but by asking them, I more and more get to know how they work, what they need, how much time things take, so on and so forth. So, but just staying curious and sort of remember to maybe don't bug your colleagues if this is the case. I'm trying to be aware of sort of if I can hear my developer sitting and sort of tapping the desk, and then maybe he wants me to shut up and move on. But ask questions, and most people are happy to explain what they're doing. So stay curious. To avoid communication mishaps, it's good to confirm things. So this is the thing that you notice, especially we are a remote company every day. So not just because of COVID and things like that, but what I noticed when I started working at Fundamentally, that it was really easy to just assume how things worked. So this is a combination of also asking questions, but sometimes when I got told to do something, I had misunderstood what I was supposed to do or just didn't capture the full picture. But by confirming or repeating instructions back to my managers, all of a sudden it became very apparent, like, oh no, I meant it like this. Oh, okay, well that explains it. I would have done it like this if you would have let me go on in my own adventure. So by confirming, you are both avoiding mishaps, things that can happen, but you're also letting your manager know that you understood what you're supposed to do. And especially, again, since it's remote, since it's online, you don't get the same kind of rapport with someone. You don't get all the small hints of someone's facial expression or tone you get probably, but tone is also hard to sort of judge on. So always when you work online, it is a bit harder to sort of gauge communication. So that's why it is important to confirm and take it from there. Coffee. Oh, almost there, I promise. Then you can ask all the questions if you have some. Rest and recharge. So Oscar knows this as well. Sort of during the time that I've been at Fundamentally, some periods have been really hard. I've been really struggling. And they have been the most supportive managers I could ever wish for. It is important that you keep the communication with your managers and with your lecturers and people in your surrounding. If there's anything that is overwhelming, talk to people. It do help. It does help. And with that also comes find what it is that gives you energy. During the spring and summer, I'm not a gardener. Jesus Christ, I'm not a gardener. I kill my plants. I wish I was more green-fingered than what I am. But actually, starting the spring and summer this year, I bought plants and I started planting them out in the communal back garden that we have here. And it was the first time in a lot of time which I stopped thinking about everything that was just too much. It gave me energy and peace. So try and find what it is that helps you. And also at this point with COVID and everything, realize that your time is important. Don't overwork and don't stay too long on, like, it's easy to sort of, especially since we have an interest in games and we usually sit by our PCs because we like it, or try to disconnect between work and play hours, if that makes sense. And remember that nothing is more important than your health. You need to take care of your first. You are number one. If you don't work mentally or physically, you won't be able to do a good job either. You need to take care of yourself. And for the second last slide, we have a lot of free resources and templates online on our website. We also do pitch deck reviews. So if you have a project that you would like to take further, this is maybe for, like, if you're in first and second year now, maybe you have a fantastic project that you have a pitch deck for. But for the future, we do reviews and we look them over. Oscar can probably tell you way more about this when I give him space to talk as well. But we want to help, and this is all for free. So please check in and say what you sort of send us what you want and take templates and stuff. And in the end, just because you're trash, that doesn't mean you can't do great things. It's called a garbage can, not a garbage can. Wise words, Oscar the Grouch. Wise words. That's it for me. Any questions?
I love the fact that you brought my my alter ego into this process.
Oh yeah! Oh my God! I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I am Oscar the Grouch. Not every day, but yeah, when I've had a bad day. Emily, that was fantastic. I really love the way that you're kind of talking to us all. So, guys, I mean, please feel free to ask any questions you have. I mean, obviously, I'm happy to help as well. And to Emily's point, so like Emily said, we're key for us is really just trying to make sure that we kind of support people as much as possible. And obviously, you know, being part of the games industry is, to me, you know, I think, you know, Emily said it perfectly. It's about kind of making sure that we're all moving forward together safely. I think that's one of the things that really I think is key, and not always been the case. I think, you know, to be fair, in this industry, there are companies out there who still do crunch. Something I think is a terrible experience. And really bad management, but then, you know, that's the nature of some of these roles. So it's trying to work out what's the best way you can deal with all of that. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to type away. I'm going to chuck a few out at you. So,
yeah,
Emily, do you think there's a particular benefit you had from having a career in retail before you came to into games? I mean, like you said, you kind of explored. You didn't know what you wanted to do at first. You then decided to do games. You made a massive transition by changing which country you were living in to do it. But what did that give you, do you think?
Well, I think first and foremost, like, just the service mind. Like, anybody who works in retail or in a pub, Jesus, I have such respect for working in a pub. I did it one summer during university. You learn to deal with people, and you learn to sort of what's most important, to gauge what is most important at the moment. I think, like, generally it also helped me with, like, volunteering for me and sort of carrying chairs and things like that. And I'd say that, like, if you had any job almost, you're not afraid to sort of do things. And I think that helped me to sort of, like, see the longer game of things. Sort of some things, sometimes you volunteered and it was really ungrateful, like, or sort of you didn't get a lot for it. But in the long run, I got a lot. Like, I went to Washington, Detroit, Toronto, and showcased my games and was a representative for Abertay, just because I volunteered.
Yeah.
So it's not just about like the CV and things like that. It's also about like the university want to invest in those students that are good representatives for their course. So
no, exactly. And I think the fact that you've been able to sort of take, in fact, that's 3 cities you mentioned I've not been to, and I thought I've been to more places than most people. But I think the key thing, like you said there, is like the ability to be able to go out of your comfort zone and go into something else, whether it's just a day-to-day job, even working at McDonald's, whatever it is.
Yeah.
That process of having a set of obligations and following through, getting shit done,
Yeah.
I think is hugely beneficial. I worked as a waiter at Butlins, my first proper job. Yeah, and that sounds. I mean, most people think I was a redcoat. I wasn't. I know I'm outrageous, but I'm not. I'm not good enough to be a redcoat. But like I say, service is really interesting because you puts you into the mindset where you want to motivate people to have a good time. It's part of your role. And the thing about being a waiter is that you actually get tips. So there's a direct measurement of how likable you are immediately, because if you get good tips, it's because you've given good service, and you don't get that in physical retail. Neil's here asking, do Fundamentally Games plan to host a game jam in the future? Oh, that's an interesting question. I don't know. For me, I haven't thought about it. What do you think? Should we do that?
Well, I think so. If you're asking me, I love a game jam.
Yeah. I mean, seriously. I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, you've just thrown the cat amongst the pigeons there, Neil. So we're going to have a chat about this, because I hadn't thought about it. We have been doing a lot of work lately, working with a few people, looking at the way hyper-casual games work. And we need to find ways to sort of increase our... no worries. We need to increase our throughput on that, and our kind of... our mindset about how we do that. And one of the things we're particularly interested in is how you go from a hyper-casual game to find a good mechanic that you can then put into a hybrid casual and possibly even a mid-core or hardcore game later. So thinking about mechanics in different ways is really important to us. And maybe that's a theme we could look at for a game jam-like event.
Yeah, I'd like it.
I mean, I suspect I'd probably want to do it through... We've doing some work with a couple of charities lately, and I'm an ambassador for Special Effect. We're a big fan. Well, I'm a big fan of Special Effect in particular because of the work they do helping people with physical disabilities. I'm also a big fan of the charity Mermaids, who help trans families and their kids. And I've been wanting to try and find a way to help those guys through computer games for quite some time. But there are complications around some of those charities, so you've got to be very careful how you do it. Anyway, enough about me. Emily, Random Binaries is asking, from your opinion, would you accept somebody who uses open source tools like Blender or GIMP?
Oh yeah, I run Windows on my work laptop. On my private one, I have Linux, and I am a big open source supporter. Open source software at the moment are really good. There are so many good tools online. So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a question really about the accessibility of, the repurposability of those skills. So I think open source is fantastic, very much something worth investing in. When you're dealing with live games in particular, sometimes the reliability and sustainability is more important. So it's very interesting to try and work out how can you take a broad knowledge of lots of different tools and then be able to apply it so you can adapt quickly. For example, we tend to work with back-end platforms like PlayFab or GameSparks or Chili Connect, but there are other tools out there where people will hack and do their own. Nothing wrong with that, but it's harder to sustain and manage some of those open source or even self-made tools than some of the established ones. So as long as you're able to adapt, I think it's fine. In fact, I think it's to be encouraged personally.
Yeah, I mean, what I hear is that Blender is more and more, if we take Blender as an example specifically, is being used more and more by indie companies
It is.
because they can't afford the licensing for some of the other ones. So open source tools are growing a lot. I know there's a lot of really good like Photoshop copies as well. Um, but yeah, as Oscar stated, like it it's a good thing if you can sort of take those skills that you use from learning Blender or learning other tools and transform them into like Maya, if it's Maya that they're using at the company that you're at. But I always encourage learning stuff. Like no one will. It's only silly people that would tell you that knowledge is unnecessary or silly. Just do learn. Learn, kids, learn.
The more you learn different tools, the more you understand why they work. And I think
Exactly.
sometimes that understanding why they work can actually then be applied to how you implement new UI systems. Particularly, so as a game designer, I want to use everything, and I'm now so old that I can't remember where I saw a particular game mechanic, and sometimes I'm reimagining something I saw in a board game as a mobile game or as a PC game, and not realizing that the original source was something physical. And so you don't want to be me, but it's interesting. You can't lose out when you do these things.
No.
So Kelly, thank you very much for that. I'm glad you enjoyed it, and obviously Emily did a fantastic job. But we've still got more questions. So Josh is saying that Global Game Jam is coming up in January. Absolutely right. Yeah. Kate Edward, who's heads up Global Game Jam nowadays, is a really good friend of ours. And I've been lucky enough to be opening the one of the London. I forgot the name of the university. Anyway, there's a university in London. I open up the Global Game Jam for with a kind of talk. So yeah, it's something I've been kind of sort of half-heartedly involved with for a long time, and I never actually stay. I never actually jam because I have no skills.
So disappointed,
I
Oscar.
know.
I just said use whatever skills you have.
Yeah. Because the trouble is that I'm a designer, which is great at the beginning, but I basically will sit there and just go, yeah, do this, and then come back like a few hours later and go, that wasn't it.
You bring coffee. You're the coffee bringer.
That's true, and I should do more of it. I do actually love doing this kind of stuff. I just don't get a chance to because too much pressure being old and in charge of too many things. So Kelly is saying she's keen to start as an associate producer in the game industry, but don't have the experience in the sector. Some companies are very strict with their job requirements, asking for 2 years experience in games. Would her producer experience in other aspects, so forums and exhibitions, count on their CV? Or would they be turned down immediately? Do you have any thoughts on that, Emily?
No, I think those are really valid experiences to add. I know there are modders who get like associate roles because as level designers because they've done such excellent work modding games. So if you have been running forums or been an admin over things like that, I think that's definitely something you should add to your CV. I mean, heck, I've added that I used to hold martial arts classes. It's
yeah, and that was like, great for me because I used to teach karate when I was a kid, so I loved seeing that on your CV.
Exactly. So I mean, you build small connections, and all the things that you have that are valuable. But sort of saying that as well, get someone if you can get either a lecturer or even a professional, and be really sort of aware of that. People working in the industry are usually very short on time, but see if you can build connection with people and show them your CV and see what they think. But I think definitely you should add that. And yeah, I know it's hard. I feel really lucky that I got the job that I got straight after university. because up until the point where fundamentally took me in, I had applied for so many associate producer roles, and they all go, well, this is a sort of entry requirement is like 2 or 3 years, as you said, but it's a starting point level. Like, where do you get the experience of 2-3 years when no one is letting you in? So I really understand your frustration. So the more you do things like that, where you're modding or admin things, perfect.
No, exactly. And I think it's actually a fundamental problem we have in the industry. The issue is that games companies are generally small to medium-sized companies, but actually, in the scheme of things, we're only small companies. Small to medium-sized company is 500 employees. Basically, Jagex is the only one, well, one of the few native UK companies that's big enough to be counted. I mean, we're starting to get to the stage where Mediatonic is starting to get... How many people are on Mediatonic nowadays? 100 or so people, I think?
Oh, yeah, something like that.
So they're starting to get a few more companies to that stage, but most of the medium to big size companies that we had in the UK in the kind of like, early 2000s, late 90s are gone. That we still have the EAs and so on and so forth, but the UK employee base isn't generally the size of the kind of larger company. So we don't really have that many companies in the UK in particular, which have the kind of support structure to be able to take people from blank to professional, if that makes sense. That I think is why it's so important that you see kind of engagement with people like Yuki, engagement where you can at events like this, networking, all of this stuff is really important. And I think Kelly, your point about your other experience, absolutely critical, because when we're looking at CVs, we're looking for we want to paint a picture that you could step up to the role. We don't expect a graduate role to have all the skills, but we need confidence that you'll stand out and have the capacity to be self-motivated. And I think if you can show that you got on and you're a producer in these other areas, that you worked on these global game jams, that you worked on these other things, the more that you kind of present a picture of that you are ready and raring to go, and you're reducing the pain threshold of bringing you up to speed, that is going to make I think any employer a lot more comfortable. It is far too hard. I totally get that. We're really not good at helping get a pipeline from university to employed. But I think the biggest problem is there's about 10,000 graduates a year. I mean, I'm making numbers up, but I've heard this from a couple of university folks. About 10,000 graduates a year, and there are only about 10,000 people working in the games industry. So it is a very refined and high process to get involved with. Just so you know my experience, I was at the point where there weren't any games courses. I made my first game pitch when I was 18 to Firebird. I pitched a game. So imagine doing that. First pitch to a major publisher at the time. I didn't get it. I didn't get the money. They told us the great game idea. Come back when you made it. That was helpful. So I decided to go off and get my education. Did that. Got into IT. It was only 10 years later I managed to get my first games job. So I think for me it's about having a vision of where you want to be and looking at what steps you can take to get you closer to it. And to Emelie's point, not everybody knows what they're going to do, but knowing the direction, what your vision is, what you want to do. Like I say, I have no skills. I can't do art, I can't code, but I do know what makes games tick and what makes people tick, and that has been really powerful for me. So I don't know if that helps, but I mean, hopefully between the two of us, we've got some sense there. Random Binaries is asking, are there games events during this pandemic that they should attend and network at? What do you think?
Well, it is kind of hard because it feels like all the Animex used to be the one that I always recommended for students to take part in. That's usually during the spring. So probably for next year, that might be an option. So that's Animex. It's at Middlesbrough Teesside University. it's one of the absolute best student focus conference I've been to. Or I take that back. It's the best that I've been to in the UK. It's really good. You get to hear a very wide range of talks from really good speakers that they bring in, and you have an opportunity during one of the evenings to actually get to talk to the speakers as well. And again, grow connections, even just going up there and say, hi, my name's this, I'm from this university. It was an absolutely fantastic talk that you had about the subject. I haven't thought about that. Thank you so much. And build something and gets a name, gets your face and name out there to people that already work in the industry. But I know that doesn't help you at the moment. I'm actually drawing blanks. There's not a lot of really good options for students at the moment. I know there's more business focused ones that are still going strong online, but they are not for you guys.
Well, I don't know. I think Ferris mentioned Pocket Gamer Connects. I think that's one that's well worth it.
That is true.
I'm heavily involved in Pocket Gamer. I host the indie track and several other tracks and help them with finding speakers. But I know that there's been a lot of effort there. Josh has mentioned Game Jobs Live. I think that's really good. I think there's been an EGX and various others online. We have an events calendar which mostly focuses on business events, but it might be useful. There are a couple of other events calendars out there that are worth checking out, some of which do cover more consumer-friendly elements. But I don't think you should shy away from business events. If you can find a way to get a student or an indie ticket to them, I think the idea of being able to listen in on these talks is really powerful. And in particular, if you can start networking with people. But it's really tricky to network online from cold. There are a few tools out there which are pretty good. There was an event that Exilio were running where they used a virtual world, a bit like I used to work on PlayStation Home, the virtual world on PlayStation 3. So it was a bit like that kind of experience. So you could actually walk up to somebody and say hello as an avatar. There are other tools like spatial.chat, which are really good for kind of having an environment. But unfortunately, most of them are using tools like Zoom, which means you've got to have a meeting, you've got to talk to somebody direct, and that's quite intimidating, particularly if you're a new starter. But I don't know. I think check out our events calendar so if you go to fundamentally.games, Emily looks after our events calendar as well. So check that out. You might find that there's some interesting stuff on there. Question for Emily. What was the most challenging experience for you as a producer, and what did you learn from it?
So at my job, at work, or during...
However you like to take that, because it could be if you were producing something as a game jam, or it could be as a game or whatever. There's all sorts of possibilities.
So personally, what I really struggle with, if I sort of look over the projects that I ran during university, was that I'm a very messy person. What worked for me personally to sort of how to structure or do my tasks and things that I wanted to do worked fantastically for me, but for no one else. So that was a struggle during my university time, trying to sort of figure out how do we structure our tasks and our days and goals for this project and make it work for everyone. And the only thing that sort of solved it really was communication, constant communication. If you have group projects that you do within your school, I would suggest team meetings at least once a week, probably 2 times, to check in, quickly do a stand up and check where everybody's doing, if anybody's blocking them, so on and so forth. And also check in on them in general, talk to them, see if everything is okay. maybe a bit harder to do. You can do it digitally because you can always DM someone. But yeah, I think that was sort of like realize that my way of working wasn't working for everybody else. And how do I change my way of communicating with people? And the fact is, it wasn't like, oh, I have found the key that works for everyone. It was communication with each member and realize what worked for them. We had a programmer that just couldn't get up in the morning. And when everybody else was in and doing work, he was always, always late, which drove me insane until the point where we sat down and had a conversation and sort of like, I see that this doesn't work for you. What can we do? And we actually just decided, okay, you come in 2 hours later than everybody else. And then we have a stand up, but you stay 2 hours later as well. And that was the only thing that we could sort of make it work. And since we then had a structure for how to sort of, well, we know he's not coming in for 2 hours, then the artist maybe worked on something else during that time. And then when he came in, we could continue on other things. So yeah, not a simple key. I said communication. As a producer, communication is the sort of the only really tool you have.
I mean, I think as any role, I think communication is the key thing anyway.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that we do your daily stand-ups, literally every day, 15 minutes, it always ends up being 30 minutes, but we always try to do a 50-minute stand-up. And we also have a longer session on the Monday, so we know what our longer-term kind of objectives are. And we're basically online on Slack all of the time. But in our particular case, it's important because we work remotely. So Emelie's in Dundee, I'm down in Aldershot, Ella is in France, Glenn is in... Where's Glenn? I've forgotten. Somewhere between London and Cambridge anyway.
Or London?
Yeah, I think he's London. I can never remember. I know he's moving, so I'm not sure.
Anyway, he's moving, so
it's just so important. And like, communicate. And actually, you can never communicate enough. I'm terrible because I just assume, and I need to be kicked on a regular basis. Let's just do this as a last question. So this is from Random Binaries. Would having Kickstarter or Indiegogo projects written on your CV be a good idea, whether they're successful or unsuccessful? Emelie, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I think so. It's the I heard one game director, and I'd say this with the caveat, it depends on how you run it, like, and sort of, but in general, yes, even unsuccessful things, if you can analyze why it didn't work, if you can tell, if questioned, why didn't it work as you wanted it to, and that's actually a really good thing, because then the people you're talking to can sort of, this person have actually thought about what they did. They didn't just sort of smash things, Kickstarter, and didn't sort of have any thought like put into it. And it's the same, like if you have started a company and it didn't go as well as you wanted it to, which is an even bigger thing. It was another game industry person who said that he thinks sort of, even if it was a fail, starting up a company, he thinks is more valuable than so many other things. I'd say that is, again, with a little bit of a caveat personally, but then again, take it for not as sort of like the hard, solid truth. It depends on how you run it and what you did wrong, which made it all go south.
No, but I'd echo that. One thing I'd just chuck in on that though is, in the UK in particular, we're not very good at realizing that failure is brilliant. I'm with the Mythbusters. Failure is always an option. And actually, the more you embrace it, the more you understand it. And to Emelie's point, the more you show you understand why. I believe, in fact, I nearly wrote a role-playing game that did this, where you only learn through failure. And if you think about that, you only learn through failure. That means working on building and releasing a game is so much more valuable than tinkering around with a game jam. Nothing wrong with game jams. Game jam's great. The fact that you actually do that process and you get through it and you deliver something, that's brilliant. But then to take that further and actually try and get it onto an app store, you've learned so much more. To actually try to make something commercial, even if it fails, you've actually tried all of those steps.
I heard someone who said, and I thought this was brilliant as well, and sort of in the same vein, where someone said it was so much easier to sort of explain why this project went wrong than this project where everything went well, and sort of analyze what went right here than sort of analyzing the failure. So it is really true. Like usually it's easier to see through failure what it is that went wrong than if you're actually succeeding. I'm still looking at Kinoko, the game that we won with, and kind of just sit there and go, what the hell just happened? I don't know how we won. I don't know why people like it. Whereas I can definitely see where things or projects that I've done that sort of didn't really work out as I wanted it to, it's really, I see what I did there, or how we should have done it like that. So if you can look at your Kickstarter or look at your things that sort of didn't go well, and you can back them up by argumenting why they happened, why it went the way it did, and I'd say add them.
I'd actually just add to that though. Ella and I have run 2 Kickstarters, one successfully, one non-successfully, and they were the hardest, most difficult projects we have ever done. So anyone who's ever tried to do a Kickstarter who actually understands what's involved will completely appreciate, it doesn't matter whether you succeed or fail, they'll completely appreciate the learning journey that process is on. But obviously what you need to do, as Emily said, is make sure that you completely communicate in a very simple way how you've learned from that process. And I think if you can do that, then you actually make your whole process much more robust. And I think that's the case with any of your experience. You need to paint the picture for your prospective employer that says, I'm a safe bet. I know this, I'm willing to learn, I'm going to be curious, and I want this. And in that emotional journey, if you can convince somebody that you're that person, it's going to be a lot easier to get their interest and support. And frankly, I think the key thing is really just emotionally engaging and being open. Provided you can show that this journey that you've gone on and communicate what lessons you've learned, keep going, keep pushing, you'll find the right role. And don't let yourself get worried if the right role takes the time to come, because generally if it isn't right, if it doesn't happen, it's not because of you. It's often because there are other requirements that company has that just don't happen to fit the shape you currently are at.
No, exactly. But sort of, and also just don't, even if the Kickstarter was a failure, you don't have to write like in your CV that, you can write Kickstarter not successful, but something. But you don't have to sort of go into details in your CV about it. If someone asks about it, have a good answer ready. Don't share your life story about that Kickstarter in your CV.
That's a fine. Super point. Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to say that it was a failure on the CV. You ran certain things, and as long as you've got the answers and they are solid and backed up, no one's going to care. And your CV is window dressing.
Yeah.
It's not, going back to a retail metaphor. It's what's in the window, not necessarily what's on the shelves. But it has to represent what's on the shelves.
Yes, exactly.
So, okay, I think that's us for time. If anyone has any kind of further points, obviously, please feel free to reach out. And yes, of course, feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'll follow up with copies of Emelie's slides and a recording. And obviously, please feel free, if you thought this was good, to tweet out and tell people what you thought about it. If it was terrible, then email us. and we'll
No. We don't want to learn. Please don't.
We'll also send out a quick survey as well, just to get your feedback. So best luck to everyone, and obviously please reach out, connect to us, and hopefully this is all useful.
Thanks.
Oh, the event, if you go to just fundamentally.games, there is a knowledge base tab, and on that knowledge base tab there's an event list. Great stuff. Thanks everybody.
Thank you. Bye.